Welcome everybody to a shiur on Shavuot, the great holiday of the giving of the Torah. The shiur that I'm going to give you today, I've got a title for it: A Shotgun Wedding and Kabbalat Torah. The Pasuk tells us, Ve'yichan Yisrael neged hahar. The Jewish people camped opposite the mountain, Mount Sinai. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, this pasuk is written in the singular. When it says Ve'yichan Yisrael, it's saying in the singular that they camped as one, but there were 600,000 people there. Says the Or HaChaim, they were united. Seeing as Am Yisrael were completely united, that's the time for Hashem to give us the Torah. The Medrash says that once HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that the Jewish people hate machlokas, hate arguments, we're running away from arguments, and love Shalom, and we want to live at peace with everybody, and we made one camp in the singular, together, everybody together, said HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is now the time to give my Torah to the Jewish people. Only when there's no machlokas, only when everyone's looking for Shalom, that actually leads to everyone being united. Once everyone is united, Am Yisrael have tremendous kochos, and Am Yisrael are fitting to receive the Torah. We're told that we said Naaseh v'nishma. Am Yisrael accepted upon themselves all the obligations of the Torah even before we knew what was written there. Naaseh v'nishma. We'll do, and then we'll learn about it and understand. So, first of all, we need to understand, is it possible for someone to accept upon themselves an obligation that they don't know what it is? Is that a valid obligation in Jewish law? How did the Jews become obligated in the Torah? That's the first question I want to deal with. Lemaisa, let me give you a scenario. Let's say that someone were to say, I promise to support a person for the next 10 years. I've no idea what the price of food's going to be. I've no idea how much they're going to eat and how much they're going to need. What's going to happen with inflation? No idea. Can I obligate myself in such an obligation? The Rambam says no. You can't obligate yourself unless you know what you're obligating yourself in. The Rosh disagrees, and he says, yes, you can. You can obligate yourself in something even if you don't know what it is yet. You can obligate yourself today that for the next 10 years you're going to support somebody, or until someone dies you're going to support them, even though you've no idea how long they're going to live. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rosh, not like the Rambam. It's a pella l'maisa. In the whole of Choshen Mishpat, the Shulchan Aruch always paskins the Rambam. There are different rules for Or HaChaim and Yeridea, but in Choshen Mishpat, the Shulchan Aruch always paskins the Rambam. One of the rare exceptions is this halakha. If you obligate yourself in something that you don't know what it is, even though the Rambam says you cannot do that, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you can. So, even though we didn't know what the Torah said yet, we certainly can obligate ourselves even though we don't know. Others say, Tosfos says, after we said Naaseh v'nishma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted up, the Medrash says, lifted up Mount Sinai and held it over the Jewish people. And he said, if you keep the Torah, great. If you don't keep the Torah, if you don't accept the Torah, I'm going to bury you all here. Why did he need to do that? We'd already said Naaseh v'nishma. We'd already agreed to accept upon ourselves the Torah. The answer is, we might think that seeing as we accepted the Torah, so we can also stop doing the Torah. It was we that had decided that we're going to do it, so maybe now we can say, one day it's not convenient for us, maybe we'll stop keeping the Torah, has for sure. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to point out to us that you should know that now you've accepted it, it's an obligation, and it's not something that you can get out of. A Jew can never get out of being Jewish. But what if you were really forced to accept something? Is that valid in Jewish law? A shotgun wedding, right? Everyone knows what a shotgun wedding is. The father of the bride is standing there with a shotgun to the head of the Chatan. Either you go through with this wedding or boom. So he goes through with the wedding. Is that a valid wedding or not? How are we going to know if it's valid or not? Whether they need a get to break up the marriage. If you say that it was garnished, it doesn't mean anything because the Chatan didn't have any intention to get married to this lady really. He's only doing it because of the shotgun. So it should be they don't need a get. But if you say that it's a real obligation, even though there's a shotgun being held to this guy's head, that means that you wouldn't need a get. So let's look at this halacha a little bit. What happens if you're forced to sell something? The Gemara tells us, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, if you hang someone up and beat them until they agree to sell you their car for the real price of the car, and you give them cash, that's a valid sale. The only way that that can be annulled is if the guy who's just sold his car can get two witnesses who saw him being beaten and saw that he was forced to agree to this sale. Only in such a case can he cancel it. He is not believed to cut after they untie him to go out and get 8 witnesses and say, look, I didn't really mean to sell my car, because he received money. If you received money, you can take that money, you can do anything you like with it. You can buy whatever you like. So seeing as you received the full value, we presume that you agreed. Okay? That's if you're forced to sell something and you get cash for it. What about if you're forced to buy something? What if someone holds you up and beats you until you agree to buy their car for the full price? Is that a valid purchase? Here, the halacha is different. Here, the halacha says you can get out of the sale. What you do is, as soon as the sale's finished, you go and get 2 witnesses and you tell them what happened, that I was forced to buy this guy's car and I really don't want it. And you can cancel the agreement, even though those witnesses don't actually know. You're believed to say that you didn't want that sale. Why? What's the difference between being forced to buy and being forced to sell? When you're forced to sell, you get cash. With cash, you can do whatever you like. When you're forced to buy, you got a car that you don't want. What are you going to do with this car that you don't want? That's why when you're forced to buy, it's easier to annul it than when you're forced to sell. Let's now get to our shotgun wedding. When you're forced to marry this lady, it's like buying or selling. It's like buying, because you're now stuck with a woman that you don't want. So being forced to marry is like buying, therefore it should be that you can just call in 2 witnesses afterwards and cancel the wedding. But it doesn't work like that. The Shulchan Aruch says no. In Even HaEzer, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that if you in any case of a shotgun wedding, you need a get. You can't, the Chatan can't come out and claim, oh no, I was forced to get married. Doesn't work, a claim like that, because we saw a wedding, there were kinyonim, everything was done in the way it should have been. The fact that he was holding a shotgun to your head, nevertheless, it's a proper marriage and you need a get. So let's go back to Kabbalah Torah, when we received the Torah. Even though, according to some poskim, we were forced to accept it when HaKadosh Baruch Hu held the mountain over our heads, nevertheless, it's an obligation that's going to be binding. It's going to be just like the shotgun wedding, that you need a get to get out of it. And with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no gittin, we can't give a get chas v'sholom to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are all obligated to keep the Torah because of these obligations that we accepted upon ourselves, the whole Jewish people at the time of Kabbalat Torah. And I want to emphasize another point here, which we'll be seeing in our course, B'ezrat Hashem. Many of you join us for the course later on. We're going to be emphasizing this point there. Every single kinyan in the Torah, all the different transactions in the Torah, they're all dependent on one thing: Gemirus Da'at. That means that a person has made a positive decision that he wants to either buy or sell. Whether all the types of kinyonim we have in the Torah, whether it's paying money, whether it's receiving something, whether it's a kinyan sudah, whatever it is, all the different kinyonim, they're just a way of showing Gemirut Da'at, that you've made a positive decision that you want to buy. And the proof of that is, we'll be explaining it more in the course, but just briefly, the custom on the diamond exchange. On the diamond exchange, if you go there and have a look at the way they're doing business there, two guys sit at the table, they show their diamonds to each other, and once they've decided to make a purchase, one of them says, or they both say, Mazel u'brocha. Once you've said Mazel u'brocha on the diamond exchange, there's a kinyan. You can't go back on your word. There's a change of ownership when you say Mazel u'brocha. But let's look in the Torah. There's no such thing as a transaction verbally. You can't make a transaction verbally. In Jewish law, a verbal agreement is a moral agreement. It's not a contractual agreement. But on the diamond exchange, they're doing a contractual agreement. So how does it work? If these two diamond dealers come to a Beit Din, the Beit Din is going to paskin, oh no, it's not valid because you just said Mazel u'brocha. Mazel u'brocha is not a kinyan, it's not a transfer of ownership. Beit Din will paskin that it's a complete kinyan. Even though it says nowhere in the Shulchan Aruch that there is such a kinyan. Why? Because seeing as it's their custom that that's the way you do business, they both had complete gemirut da'at when they said Mazel u'brocha. And that is the basis for every kinyan. So really, all the proofs aside, when Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma, they had complete intention to accept the Torah. So really, how it works in kinyonim is not even relevant. Because when you have gemirut da'at, you've accepted upon yourself something. I just want to move on to one other point. As we said, the Medrash says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that the Jewish people are running away from machlokas and they want shalom, they want peace, and they're all together united, that's the time for giving the Torah. How do we become united? What is being united? The truth is that once we put aside machlokas and once we run after shalom, the coming together will just happen. But there's a tremendous Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. It talks about the posuk that we all say on a Friday night in Eshet Chayil. Sheker achen v'chevel hayofi. Isha yirat Hashem hi titala. Sheker achen, chen, a type of beauty, is really false. Hevel hayofi, physical beauty is not the main thing. What we really want is a Isha yirat Hashem. That's the conclusion of the posuk. A God-fearing woman. Says the Gemara that Sheker Achen is referring to the generation of Moshe and Yeshua, where there was a lot of Torah being learnt. Hevel Hayofi, that's referring to the generation of Chezkiah. During the generation of Chezkiah, they checked from the north of Israel to the south of Israel. Everyone was a Talmid Chacham. There was a lot of Torah around. Isha yirat Hashem hi tithalal, says the Gemara, is referring to the generation of Yehuda b'Rabbi Eli. What was great about the generation of Yehuda b'Rabbi Eli? That it got the yirat Hashem hi tithalal, the Isha yirat Hashem hi tithalal, the spitz, the spitz of the praise. Says the Gemara, in that generation, that 6 people would be able to cover themselves with 1 talit. 1 talit, 6 people. How can 2 people cover themselves with 1 talit? If each person is pulling the talit so that it's going to be covering them, then 2 people can't be with 1 talit. The only way that 2 people can be with 1 talit is if each one of the 2 is trying to make sure that the other guy is covered. Then it's possible for 2, and then it's also possible for 6. 6 people can only be under 1 talit if each one of the 6 is making sure that the other 5 are covered. And he's not just looking out for himself. If that happens, that's achdut. That's being together. 6 people under 1 talit. That was the great praise of this generation of Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli. That all 6 people, they weren't thinking about themselves. They weren't worried about covering themselves. Each one of them was worried to make sure that the other 5 guys were covered. That was the greatness of that generation. That's what true achdus is. B'ezrat Hashem, Am Yisrael will get to Achdut. We've got a lot to do. We've got a lot of work to do. But if each one of us does our part and we each help the other people to be covered by the Talit, Bezat Hashem will get to true Achdut and the coming of Mashiach, Bezat Hashem. Thank you.